From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to Blue Sky, where we share stories and insights to remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. I'm your host, Bill Burke. My guest today has spent his career in two fields I personally love, music and sports. And after achieving success in these domains, today he says he's trying to spend his third act making a difference for young people by fostering and showcasing their talent and helping them grow and develop in the process. Phil Green is the executive director of Follow the Music, an organization he co-founded in 2023 in his native Oakland, California. Phil's an executive who has worked at the intersection of sports, entertainment, and social impact for over 20 years. He previously co-managed three-time Grammy winner and NPR Tiny Desk Contest winner, Fantastic Negrito, helping launch what the music industry said couldn't be done, a genre-defying rock star at 50 years old. As you'll soon hear, Follow the Music was born from Phil Green's friendship with NFL Hall of Famer Ronnie Lott, who connected him with a venue owner in Menlo Park seeking creative programming. Today, Follow the Music has grown into a nonprofit that provides artist development, booking, and management services to young musicians to shine a light on their talents and bring visibility to the programs that help develop them. Phil's a terrific person overseeing a remarkable organization, and I hope you enjoy this blue sky conversation with him as much as I did. Phil Green, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Hey, Bill, thanks for having me.
I'm really pleased to have you on. It's been a pleasure learning more about you. And one of the one of the organizing principles of your life is Northern California, specifically these days, Oakland. Were you born and raised there, or how did you first become so involved with this part of the world?
Yeah, no, I born and raised in Oakland, and Oakland has a very specific point of view on the world, and so it's definitely been a big part of my identity. And I grew up here and then lived in Los Angeles for 25 years and moved back right before the pandemic.
And your background is in both sports and music, and then there's some interesting overlap. So can you describe a very famous athlete from the Bay Area, Ronnie Lott, several years ago, as I understand it, sort of came to you with an idea. Could you talk about that and how it turned into the work you're doing today?
Yeah, well, Ronnie came to me really with an opportunity, and it evolved into something much bigger. Neither one of us really expected it.
And this is Ronnie Lott, the Hall of Fame football player from the San Francisco 49ers, just for everyone's benefit.
Yes, yeah, Ronnie, the all-time from the Bay Area. He's sort of the defensive version of Joe Montana, the icon that's really shaped 49er football in the 80s. And so Ronnie came to me with an opportunity. He said that he had a friend who was opening a new venue in Menlo Park. He knew I worked in music. I had been working with an artist named Fantastic Negrito in the Bay Area who'd won a few Grammys, won the first NPR Tiny Desk Contest. And I think he was originally thinking that we would put Fantastic Negrito on a stage and have a show there. But I told him that I was actually leaving work with Fantastic Negrito, and that I had started working with a young artist named Satya from Oakland, and that really my heart was into like working with emerging artists that were at the beginning of the journey, artists that were preparing to take these bigger stages. And so I said, hey, if you guys want to put together an emerging artist night, we could do that. And so anyway, that's where it started. It evolved into much more than that, but we can get into that a little bit as we go. So
yeah, no, it's been amazing. And I want to pause too and go back to Fantastic Negrito, because it's an interesting transition you made. If I understand it, you helped him make his big splash, especially in the music business, quite late in life, like 50 or so. Can you describe that?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit about Fantastic Negrito's journey. So He literally, when he was in his 20s, he got signed to the big recording deal. He had gone down to LA to make it big. He got signed to Interscope, a seven-figure deal. At the time, it was one of the biggest deals around. They put out an album. It was a very well-produced album, but it didn't move the needle. And a year or two later, he was actually in a car accident and he wound up in a coma, and he lost most of the use of his playing hand. And when he emerged from the coma, the record label actually dropped him. And so that was his introduction to the music business. Um, he basically, walked away from music for a large portion of his life. And then at the birth of his son, he decided that it sparked something in him. So he came back to music, and he was literally just busking on the streets of the Bay Area, playing in front of BART stations. And so anyway, that's where he A&R'd what became his debut album. He would test all the material on the streets. I started working with him before he released his first album. The big thing that changed things for him was, I think, when he came back to music on his own terms for his own reasons, he was able to find his real sound, like his real unique voice. And before, when he was in his 20s, he was just doing whatever all the people were telling him that should be done to make it in the music business. And that's often where a lot of young people get lost. They hear the voices in their head, hey, do this and you'll be a big star. And they lose that sort of that thing that makes them really special and unique. And so for him, almost losing his life, having to give everything up, was the thing that just made him decide, I want to do this for my own reasons. And he developed a sound. He won the Tiny Desk contest, and then first album Grammy, second album Grammy, third album Grammy. Pretty amazing.
Incredible. And you sort of said in passing that after this seven-figure deal, he gets injured and gets cut. And the music business, for people who don't follow it, I don't follow it closely, but just by reputation, it's not always the friendliest place. It's not always the easiest. And I'm assuming that probably has an influence on the type of work that you're doing today with younger people.
Very much so. A lot of my work was shaped from that experience with Fantastic Negrito, and just being witness to what works and what doesn't work. And, the music business is a really hard business to make sense of. I don't really fault the labels or the industry. The economics of it are really tough. And so, they try to take the risk out of it. They try to, but in doing so, they make it more predictable, more derivative. It's sort of like, hey, do what that person's doing over there and you'll become successful. And the real magic and the real, the artists that have gone on to have 20, 30-year careers are the ones who sort of break the mold and do things their own way. And so really, that's a big part of what we're trying to instill in people, is having the courage to lean into the things that you do well, whether you go on to make it in music or not. Really, it's ultimately about having that self-confidence and being clear on what how you want to show up in this world.
Phil Green moved back to his native Oakland after 20 years in Los Angeles. And it's in the Bay Area that he's decided to try to make a difference with his work at Follow the Music. Prior to this, his time working with Fantastic Negrito demonstrated his optimistic willingness to take on tough challenges. This was an artist who'd been dropped by his label and was in the music world considered far too old for a comeback. 3 Grammys later, he and Phil Green have proved everybody wrong. With this example, he says that the biggest successes in creative fields break the mold and don't blindly follow the rest of the crowd. This is advice he shares with the young people he works with at Follow the Music. And we'll talk more about that now. Jumping back, Ronnie Lott comes to you with this idea. He's got a new venue, Menlo Park. He's thinking probably Fantastic Negrito, that sort of thing. But you start thinking about kids, and this has grown into what's now called Follow the Music. Can you just broadly describe what is Follow the Music all about? What are your goals? And then we could talk about some more specifics.
Yeah, so follow the music really is ultimately, I mean, the simplest way of saying it is it means sort of follow your heart. Follow the things that really light you up, so that that you bring to the world what you really have to offer, your true gifts, your most honest self. And we have gone on from this very first event that we did at the Guild Theater. I was sharing with you a bit, had very humble beginnings. We really I just thought I was going to have my artist Satya on the stage. But then the next day I had a conversation with a friend telling him what we were going to do. And he said, "Hey, I've been wanting to get all of the leading youth organizations in the Bay Area together to sort of share best practices and build community." And I said, "Oh, maybe we can do that at my event at the Guild." And so the next thing I knew, we were actually partnering with Oakland School for the Arts, SF Jazz, the San Francisco Community Music Center, Glide Memorial Church, several of the leading youth organizations in the Bay Area. And we allowed them to program the event themselves. And, we didn't have Satya, we didn't have my artist on the stage, we didn't have any of her friends like I originally expected. And I had never seen any of these kids perform in my life. And we had a full house because Ronnie was promoting it. Sheila E. was involved and she was promoting it. And I was terrified because I had not seen, it's like, okay, you couldn't find these kids on social media. There was really very little about them. And then that night, what I saw was kids who had so much talent and so much to offer. I was like, wait, what's happening here? How is it that these kids have so much going for them? And A, they have no social media. They're kids. They shouldn't they be all over social media? And then B, like, isn't this energy the thing that made the Bay Area such a great place in the first place? Such a vital, vibrant, transformative place is music and culture and youthful energy. And I was like, shouldn't we be getting behind this?
Incredible. So follow the music is formed, and tell us how that works. You mentioned also the Oakland School for the Arts and these other folks you've partnered with. Is Oakland School for the Arts, is that an after school thing, or is that a place kids go who want to pursue the arts as full-time students?
It's public education. It's a full-time school, middle school and high school. They get 4 hours of arts emphasis every single day. So they basically have their academic classes in the morning, then the whole afternoon until 4:30 is the arts. They have produced some amazing artists. Actually, Zendaya is one of the more famous to come out of that school. Kaylani, who's another very prominent R&B artist. But they really sort of tapped into the culture and legacy and history that Oakland has always had. So
Incredible. So you work with students who might also be involved there, and then tell us how Follow the Music helps support, grow, and really put these artists out into the world.
yeah, so I mean, basically, just like everything with this project, it all sort of unfolded organically. And in another conversation with a friend of mine who worked at the Warriors, he said, "Hey, we could use some artists like this when we do like our Christmas tree lighting in front of the Chase Center." And so I was like, "Oh, maybe I can take all the relationships that I developed with Fantastic Negrito and through my life in this, in this business, and I can start to create an on ramp for promising young artists to, just have a easier way to begin and to really shine a light on what they have to offer." So we wound up partnering with Hardly Strictly Bluegrass, which is a big festival over here, with Bottle Rock, which is, I think the third largest festival in the state of California. We've had artists, we had a 14-year-old play at Bottle Rock, which was pretty amazing. And then, we've partnered with the Warriors. We've partnered with the Valkyries, the new WNBA team here. We've worked with the Oakland Roots, the soccer team. So
Yeah, and it seems you mentioned before the mystifying nature of the music business, and my sense is I'm more closely related to or understand better what little I understand of sort of television and video content and now podcasting. And it seems to me there that music's probably similar. In some ways, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. If you're an artist, it's a great time because you can produce your stuff very inexpensively in your basement or whatever, you can distribute it literally to everyone in the world or everyone who's connected to the internet in some way. But that's the worst of times because it's so hard to get found. There's so much out there. A lot of it's awful. And how do you stand out? It seems that one of the things you've done strategically with your background, your connections, is you can place these artists in high visibility places like a lighting ceremony, like these festivals. Is that part of what you're trying to do through Follow the Music?
Yeah, I mean, what we're ultimately trying to do is be the connective tissue between all of these organizations and bringing the whole Bay Area together, to really support music education and to lift up these artists and to say, isn't this, like we were just talking about, isn't this the spirit that made the Bay Area such a vibrant place? Bill, one of the things that I think there's a little bit of a disconnect here is that it's not so much about just like the professional side of it and the artist development side. And I don't want this to be a conversation about like the industry, because that's really less about ultimately, this is more about the simple, humble beginnings of this whole thing, were me being witness to these kids and their spirit, and then realizing there's not going to be anybody there to help them. And if I don't step in and be that person to help guide them, then they may not get where I really believe they belong. And so I was witness to their spirit and their energy and their vulnerability, and their songwriting was so impactful. And I was like, isn't this the energy that our world that's going through so much these days? Isn't that the energy we want to really bring forward? And so that was really the genesis of it, was, conversations with Ronnie about like, how much young people are struggling these days and the lack of hope in the world. And yet here I was, thinking those same thoughts and, then witnessing these kids so brave, so courageous, so much heart, so much to offer. And I was like, man, what else can I really do other than just sort of dedicate myself to helping them? And that was really...
That's amazing. And I'm glad you describe it that way, because we're probably roughly the same age, and you can get to a point where you're sort of at that get off my lawn age when it comes to younger kids, or they're all slackers, or when I was a kid, and then you spend time with young people and you realize they've got just incredible ideas, incredible energy. And I think one of the reasons I wanted you on here is that it produces some optimism in you, that, the future is really bright if we give these kids a chance, give them the tools they need, and then get the heck out of their way. Young people are amazing.
Yeah. I reached a point in my life where I realized I'm sort of entering what I would describe as like my third act, where I've already had a career. And so it's really a question of like, what can I do to sort of help support this next generation? I feel like this is like the handoff moment. I'm passing the baton. And I really feel like that's sort of a calling for all of us, especially given the way that the world is. How can we take the benefit of our experience, and help them navigate the world that feels like it's not presenting a lot of different choices or options. It feels like it's sort of us and them and very divided. And how can we help prepare them to sit in that middle ground? And so anyway, that's really the spirit of this thing, is just doing whatever we can to support young people. And I found that music, both enabled them to show their soul and their spirit, but also it's that thing that can bring people together, create community. And, it really has that ability to reach us in our heart, which is a place that I think we're getting more closed off from.
Beautiful. The sports and music worlds really did come together when Ronnie Lott approached Phil Green about helping open a new music venue. It's likely that the 49ers star was thinking about Fantastic Negrito, but by this point, Phil had seen the incredible talent of the young people he'd started working with, and he decided it was their bravery, courage, and energy that he wanted to highlight. By the way, Phil also mentioned Sheila E. If there are any young listeners out there not familiar with her, you should check out the music video for her 1984 hit, The Glamorous Life. That song was written by Prince, and the video is peak 1980s. I promise. But I digress. From this start with Ronnie Lott, Phil has continued to use his experience to help kids develop their music and his contacts to place them in front of crowds. Getting back to our conversation, we'll talk about one group that has enjoyed a lot of this kind of exposure. Let's talk specifically about some young artists you've worked with. Oakland Rising. And I would not have been familiar with them had I not connected with you. And I have listened and learned, and they are spectacular. Can you tell us a little bit about Oakland Rising and what they're all about, how they came together and what they do?
Yeah, so Oakland Rising is a collective. The artists in Oakland Rising are Naima Nascimento, B. DeVoe, and August Lee Stevens, all equally talented. August was classically trained pianist, and really was a late bloomer, only started in vocals, her senior year of high school. And man, she just lights up the stage. Like I said, she opened for Smokey Robinson, is getting all sorts of opportunities in her solo career. B. DeVoe just released their debut album and is headlining SF Jazz this year. August is also headlining SF Jazz this year. And then Naima Nascimento, she is like now just 16, but she sings in English, Spanish, Portuguese. She plays guitar, she plays piano, she plays violin. She was actually featured in Rolling Stone when she was 10 years old. And on top of all of that, I think her skill set, her like superpower is songwriting. And she also is in an all-female bluegrass band, and she's 16. So yeah, she's a powerful young human being.
And makes me think of sports too, because I've seen her performances online, and the ones I watched, I think she was still 15, and she reminds you of some of those sort of prodigies in sports where I wouldn't have guessed she was 15. I mean, just physically, the way she presents herself, she is so mature and so talented. It's really striking.
Yeah, when we helped her get the opportunity to perform at Bottle Rock when she was 14, they decided they didn't have time to put together a band for it. And normally, when you're at a festival, you want to have a band and you want to be loud and draw attention. But then I thought, how amazing is it that there's this 14-year-old who's going to get up there by herself with her guitar and play, at Bottle Rock. And she was so courageous and so comfortable. It's like you're being witness to somebody that was doing what they were born to do. And I would say that about Naima, but I would also say that about the other two. Their journeys have been very different. B has been singing since she was 3 years old. And like I said, August was more of a late bloomer and started vocals in her senior year. But I'm so grateful she did, because she's got a stunning voice. And I personally believe if she's not playing in arenas, then I will have failed at my job, because she's got all three of them have that level of talent. There's 7 members, but it will evolve over time because some will age out and some will go off to college. But they were brought together. It was literally a year ago this month at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. That's when they made their debut at a big festival. It's sort of a super group of artists from the East Bay. And they were brought together really to change the narrative around Oakland. As you read about it in the press, there's talk about crime and there's talk about homelessness and displacement. And it was really just, they came together to really bring a different spirit and energy to it. And yeah, Hardly Strictly was really meant to be their only performance, but they did so well, they wound up getting a national booking agent. And as you know, a year later, they're performing at the Kennedy Center. So it's been an amazing ride.
And I'd like to pause on the Kennedy Center because it was, I thought, a really provocative, interesting, and ultimately beautiful story where they get this invitation, and I can't remember if the invitation came after, or certainly the performance is going to come after the tumult that's gone on at the Kennedy Center and the changeovers and boycotts from certain artists based on the the changes at the Kennedy Center. And these young women were presented with this real dilemma. Do I go or don't I? Can you describe how they went through that and then what ultimately happened? Because I thought it was an amazing story.
Yeah, the invitation did come after the changes at the Kennedy Center. It came from somebody who had been there from, through for years. And so it was a really sort of, I wouldn't say, it was just a thoughtful moment, where we had these young artists and talking to them and their parents, and there were a lot of conversations about, okay, do you want to go? And if you're going to go, how do you show up? And in fact, what wound up happening was half of the band elected not to go, and then the other half did choose to attend. And it was so beautiful to watch them have those conversations, and there was never any like fighting or any animosity. It was, they were just so supportive of each other's decisions, and I really want to live in that world. And so I learned so much just watching their grace and their mutual support. The ones who chose to go, they really felt like they wanted to hold space for other voices, and they felt sort of called to stand in that space. And so they wound up actually having to perform as a trio. The Kennedy Center performance, normally we have 7 musicians. The Kennedy Center performance was the first time they ever performed in a trio, as a trio. And I think you saw the performance. It was stunning. So
It was pretty amazing. And the ones who did go were hoping to, like you said, create that exposure and to show what they were all about and what the possibilities of people, young people like that. And they certainly met the moment.
yeah, like they showed up, they didn't show up to be like defiant in a sort of angry or aggressive way. They just chose to show up and do what they do, which was sing about beauty and loss and love and hope, and allow people to judge that on the merits. And they were so um you know vulnerable. One of the artists, started to, one of the songs was dedicated to their sister who had passed, and they performed that song several times and never had any issues. And then on the Kennedy Center stage, they were moved to tears. And then to watch the 2 other artists step in and support that artist, and to watch it all come back together, like, was um magical. So
Yeah, and once again, being inspired by people significantly younger than you and I, it's is a pretty powerful thing. You've mentioned a few times the city of Oakland, the challenges of Oakland, and for people who don't live there, don't know the Bay Area, one of the things we all hear about the Oakland A's left. A lot of people don't even know the Golden State Warriors, that because they're called Golden State, they were in Oakland until not too long ago. So there've been a lot of challenges there. Can you talk about what that's been like and then how that inspires you? Because you could have bailed by now. You could be somewhere else. What makes you stay, and what do you hope to achieve in the work that you're doing to help that community thrive?
yeah. I mean, I think there's a palpable sense of loss with the A's leaving, the Raiders leaving, the Warriors moving across the bay to San Francisco, because Oakland's a very prideful place. And, we have literally, pound for pound, one of the most powerful, arts and culture and sports legacies in the world. We produce so many talented, people in music, but also Marshawn Lynch was from Oakland, and Ricky Henderson was from Oakland, and all these greats in sports. And so that's always been a great source of pride. But the other thing that's a really powerful source of pride from Oakland is its sort of ability to reinvent itself and its resilience. And so there have been lots of changes, but I wanted to be a part of the conversation, both about like what made Oakland so great in the first place, and who's doing the work to continue that, and how can we shine more light on it. And so
And how do you feel that's going? I mean, do you feel like there's a groundswell now, and people are saying, "Okay, what can we do out of the ashes of these tough things that have happened?"
yeah, I mean, I do feel I have not in my lifetime seen sort of the arts and culture and music community in Oakland come together the way it has in these last few years. I feel like there's a real forward sense of momentum on the sports side of things. The A's left, but they launched a team called the Oakland Ballers, and they just won the championship in their division. And so, and what I love about the Ballers, and we also now have the Oakland Roots, which is a great professional soccer team that's now playing at the Oakland Coliseum. And those organizations, have leaned into community. They've leaned into promoting young musicians. We've had several artists perform, whether it was the national anthem or performing pregame or at halftime. And so they're building it sort of from the ground up, but with real, connection to the community, in a way that like major professional sports is starting to lose because it's become so corporate. And so, I'm very optimistic about where things are at with Oakland.
That's exciting. Yeah, you really have latched on to some of the more the sports and the levels of sport that really have a lot of tailwinds these days, that are growing, that are changing, that are reaching back into the community, that feels like it's been, even in places that still have the teams, the games are unaffordable. They're nowhere near as accessible as they were when we were all young people. And so I get encouraged by some of these new sports, women's sports and things like that are really gaining. The story of Oakland Rising is a great one. They are extremely talented young musicians. In the case of the Kennedy Center, this invitation is one that they deserved, but that also presented a dilemma. After thoughtful reflection and discussion, which Phil describes as marked by grace and mutual support, 3 members of the group decided to go to Washington and perform. Here's an excerpt from their exceptional appearance.
And we tried another way to find it, only breaking down what was left with our open hands and empty pockets, searching for what we know's there in better places, better places, better places.
As you can hear, these are extremely poised and talented young people. And Phil Green is determined to help them and simultaneously his city, which is trying to rebound from the loss of teams from the NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball. Unlike those teams, Phil Green isn't going anywhere, and he's determined to keep making a positive difference in Oakland. Now, back to the final segment of my Blue Sky conversation with Phil Green. As you work with Follow the Music, so you're building these kids up, you're letting them express themselves. Have you had, and do you think you'll have people who wind up pursuing music as a career, and have you been able to help them springboard into actually making a living with this creative work?
Yeah, so that's a really important question. There's sort of 2 pieces to that. One is that we don't expect people necessarily to go on and have a professional career in music. Really, what Follow the Music about is illuminating the transformational power of music. And so one of the organizations we work with, for example, is this organization called ELM, which teaches orchestral music, and it teaches orchestral music to a mostly immigrant community in San Rafael. And the whole goal of that program is to put them on a path to college. So it has nothing to do with them taking major stages and rocking the mic or anything like that, and so that's really at the heart of this is, what music can offer to people, not just on the professional path, but just as a life skill and a source of expression and community. That said, we have highlighted and found several really amazing artists. And 3 of them are in Oakland Rising who are already starting to have their own professional careers. One of them has a booking agent now and is just opened for Smokey Robinson recently. And so these are artists that are getting opportunities to prove that they're ready for these moments. And we make sure of that too. We make sure that we don't place anybody in a situation that they're not prepared for. Um, and so, yes, there will be some that I really believe in my heart are going to go on to take the biggest stages and headline amphitheaters. But that's not ultimately the real purpose of this.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the orchestral work and a path towards college, what we haven't talked about is how music can be an incredible learning environment for discipline, for showing up, for learning how to read music, for working with other people, for persevering when you're not having such a good day. All those basic things. And in some ways, I think our culture has become quite sports focused. We still have sports in schools, but a lot of places have cut the arts. And so it seems like you can fill a gap there that's really vital.
Yeah. I think you're right to draw that comparison to sports, because I see a lot of the same. They always talk about how sports teaches teamwork and all these values, and music teaches the exact same thing. And so, this wasn't really by design, but because Ronnie Lott was a part of this from the beginning, we just naturally sort of fell into these opportunities in the sports world, and the sports world has really embraced us. So, we've worked with all of the local sports teams, created tons of opportunities. But yeah, I think there's a recognition that music has a lot of the same sort of qualities that sports has. It just doesn't have the same resources that sports has.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure, I hope people are listening to this in other parts of the country and thinking, we should be doing this here. Or I wonder if we're doing something similar here. Are you aware of other organizations around the country? And might you be someone with an ambition to help others start this sort of thing in other places? Or have you bitten off more than you can chew already? And
No, we certainly, think that what we're creating is a bit of a model, because ultimately what we wanted to do was highlight the work of all the other people in the region that were doing great work, and bring that up and create sort of more of a narrative around the need to support music education. So we weren't trying to replicate the programs that already exist. We were just trying to basically create the community and the narrative to uplift the whole thing. And so, I think you could do the same thing in Nashville easily. I think you could do the same thing in Los Angeles. Start with other music cities. But right now we're focused on the Bay Area, and because a lot of this is driven by music as a tool to help young people navigate the future and to sort of shape where this world is going. It makes sense to start it in the Bay Area, because that's the Bay Area's legacy. Like the music scene arose here in times of change and turmoil, and it helped point the way forward.
so if people want to learn more about your work and also have the privilege of listening and seeing the performances of some of the folks you work with, where are the best places for them to go, and maybe even events that they could attend?
Yeah, so followthemusic.live is our website. OaklandRisingBand.com is where you can follow Oakland Rising. We're obviously also on Instagram, and we're doing shows all the time. The calendar is constantly changing. We'll be on the East Coast with Oakland Rising again next year. We're not quite prepared to announce those dates. We did just get our first offer in Europe, and so we're looking to potentially bring Oakland Rising to Europe. So yeah, so we had actually, I could just share with you quickly, Germany Public Radio did an interview with Oakland Rising, and that opened the doors for a festival out there. And so right now we're like, and that's how this whole project has unfolded. Just doors have opened up when people have responded to the message and the sincerity of what we're trying to do. So
That's amazing. And I'd love to go back to where we started and mention Ronnie Lott and you, both extremely successful in sort of your first two acts, if you will, or your second act careers. And it's really impressive and inspiring to see how you've used these platforms that you have, the experience that you have, to create this. You're not doing this to get rich. You're not doing this to get famous. You're doing this to help young people and to do something good in the world. And so I applaud you for that. And I encourage other people listening in similar situations to think about ways they can give back with their skills and talents. And you're a real inspiration that way.
Yeah, sometimes it's felt a little quixotic, you know, it was certainly a leap of faith, but also, in the end, why are we really ultimately here? And I knew that, no matter what I did, if I knew that this could be my gift, my contribution, and already just the impact that we've had on the handful of lives watching some of these kids step into these moments has more than paid off, in terms of what I expected from this. It's actually far surpassed anything that I expected. And so, yeah, that's the reward, and I want to be a part of encouraging other people to operate from that place.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure people are going to be encouraged by this conversation, Phil, and I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thanks for all that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Take care.
I really appreciated the points that Phil made about the life lessons young people can learn from music education. Being part of an orchestra, for example, teaches teamwork, accountability, discipline, so many of the very same benefits we often cite when talking about what kids can get from sports. And Phil is clear that his work is not about turning out professional musicians. Yes, some from Follow the Music might make their careers in this field, but most will likely not. Instead, they'll build valuable life skills, and this, Phil Green says, could be his gift to them and to the future of his beloved Oakland. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Phil Green. Before you go, please leave us a rating and review. These help us keep making our shows better, and they make it more likely that new listeners will find us. While you're at it, you might want to subscribe to Blue Sky wherever you get your podcasts. Sign up for the Blue Sky Weekend newsletter at theoptimisminstitute.com and follow us on social media. This and all Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the incredible editing and mixing done by the team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. All graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. That's Crush with a K, if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.